Hi, everybody. Welcome to data fishing. Um, so just before we begin, I want to explain a little bit about how this is going to be kind of different to all the other workshop and sessions that you've done so far, because this is technically not a workshop. It's an exercise. Think of it like a hackathon, in fact. Like the more you put in, the more you're going to get out of this, right? So this is one of those safe spaces I want to create where I want you to explore and understand where you can go and literally fish for data. All right. So before we begin, I just wanted to set the tone in terms of the rules of this session. And so just a couple of rules, right? Is I have not been around with you guys for too long. So I wanted to make sure you knew that this is how we want to make sure that the session goes. So number one, there are no wrong answers here, right? This is a safe space to trial and error and say, what is malaria data? Because I don't know what malaria data is, right? Like, we want it to be a space where you are practicing how to find and interpret evidence. And that means that we don't expect perfection because it's never going to be perfect in the real world. I also wanted to encourage you all to please talk and talk lots because the more we talk, the more we learn from each other. So if you notice something, if you feel like interrupting, please interrupt me along the way because that's how we're going to learn more from each other. And then as part of data fishing, you don't need to know everything. That's the point of this exercise. It's to grow our mindset and learn something that we're not sure of. And I'm hoping that this is going to be a very proactive exercise and everybody tries to contribute at least something small, right? Like, but please try and contribute because every little piece adds to the evidence that you are going to be fishing for today. So with that in mind, today's learning objectives are the follows is today we're going to be fishing for data, but by the end of this session, I want you as participants to be able to know how to take a question, specifically a question from like a programmatic standpoint or a policy standpoint, and turn them into something searchable. I want you to be able to recognize how to go and search and find these credible outputs, public resources, identify when you need to look at reports, what kind of visuals you may need, all sorts of different mechanisms. And I want you to identify how to record those sources and the key pieces of what we call metadata that might be supplemental to those kind of visuals that you want to grab. And then lastly, by the end of the session, I want you to be able to create or use evidence to propose a sort of logic. And the exercise is going to be around national stratification. So I've just mentioned a really random word, right? I've said fish. But what do I actually mean by fishing for data? For all of those who live by the ocean, like the one right behind me, I'm hoping that you go sometimes fishing into the ocean, right? And sometimes you catch something and sometimes you don't catch. And that's a similar kind of notation when it comes to data. However, it's slightly different in the sense that in the real world, especially when it comes to public health data, we may know that there are certain sources that are available, but we may not have access to them. And a really key example of this is access to a health surveillance system. Now, health surveillance systems are private because it holds a lot of sensitive information, not just about malaria, but about any kind of disease. So, for example, people's HIV statuses are held on health surveillance systems, which are private. And so typically, you need to get a login or access or permission from a Ministry of Health to be able to access a lot of that kind of rich information. And so instead, we might want to go fish for data. And when I say fish for data, we might want to go and find public data. Now, the reason we might want to do this is because typically, if we're trying to do something and we're new at doing it, we want to understand the context that we're doing it in, right? Not always if you don't have access to that data in a health system, you are asked to support a country, you might need to think of data that can be found externally before you actually get granted that permission from the country to see their own local data. You might be preparing across multiple countries, so you might be exploring the comparison of, say, Tanzania to Nigeria or Nigeria to Mozambique. And so you want something that is kind of general and public because you don't know if you're going to get access to the data across all of them. And overall, you might just want to understand the landscape before diving deep, right? Sometimes we might be going down the wrong pathway, and using public resources can help us with knowing if the direction that we're trying to go into is the right kind of direction. And then finally, sometimes when you start with public data, it gives you an insight of what you might expect, which can help guide how you ask for permission, right? So we should never assume that we're going to be given data, but what we need to make sure is we become very good at being able to help those who wish to give us access to data know the right kind of data that we're after. And so public data kind of gives us that first layer of information. Like it allows us to start looking at the richness of the data before we even get to the data that we don't have permission for. And so that's what we're going to try and practice here. We're going to try fish for as much public data to help us with a question that is typically asked by a lot of malaria programs. And so how does fishing work? Like how do you get a good catch, right? Like, when you're out there with your pole, there are certain rules of how you fish, right? So similar to data fishing, there are four parts to getting a good catch. And the first one is to start with the right question. So there's always a question that will prompt you to go fish for data. And you want to ask yourself, what decisions are we trying to inform with that question? After that, we might think of the indicator. So, what measure is going to help us to answer that question we're trying to inform? Where can I find that information about that indicator? So, what source of information? And then finally, questioning all the information that you found. So asking it, what does it suggest? What are you interpreting about it? What gap do you still have? So what are you not sure about based on the data? Remember to always be like Sherlock Holmes, like you're always trying to be an investigator, but you also want to criticize a little bit about what you do to be honest about the do's and don'ts with the data that you find. So, before my next slide, I'm going to actually ask everybody to please pull out your phones because this next part is going to get a bit more interactive. So I would love you to please scan the QR code here because I would love to find out what kind of public health data sources you already are familiar with. So what kind of place do you go and get public health data, especially when you don't have access to it? So please scan the QR code or join slido.com and put in the hashtag number that's below if the QR code is not working. But please get out your phones. Um, so I'll pause here to see how many of you join. How many of you are on this call? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. There are about 8 of you, I believe. All right. So I have DHS. I only have one person on this slide. So if you notice, I can see how many folks are here. So I want everybody to get on this and give me an example of what you're doing of any public data source that you know, public health data source. Hi, Babalola. We just started a little quick exercise. So if you can hear
Hi.
me, hi. If you can hear me, would you please scan the QR code and join this slide because I would like to know other public data sources that you are familiar with.
Okay, I'm trying to do that right away.
Great. So I still only have one participant, and there are now 10 of you on this call. So please scan and let me know if you're having any issues with getting onto this slide. Great. Ministry of Health or National Bureau of Statistics. Yeah, they have tons of data actually. Sometimes like you might not realize it, but they've got all these really cool dashboards and tools that give you, it might be aggregated, but it's still public data that gives you some kind of information, right? And that extends to not just Tanzania. Like I'm sure the National Bureau of Statistics for your own country probably has a lot of tools to be able to explore some level of data that is population based. And they typically have health data involved as well. WHO, yeah. So WHO has both their own resource. So they have loads of resources on guidelines, including what we call the malaria threat map. Yes, the malaria threat map, I don't know if anyone's ever seen it, right? It typically follows threats that are specific to malaria. And they have like four categories, like biological and vector and different kinds of things. But they follow things like drug resistance, they follow things like insecticide resistance, HRP2 deletions, and I can't remember the fourth one. But please have a look at it. If you just Google WHO threat map, you'd find it. So I only have four participants. I have 10 people on this call. So please, I'm also very good at not moving until I get everybody involved. So we are more than happy to spend 1.5 hours on this one slide until we get everybody to participate. DHIs too. That's great, but remember what I previously said is it depends which data from DHIs too. So there are two types. They might have a public portal that provides very high level information, like maybe the regional or the national level values of certain diseases. But if you wanted the fine scale data, like health facility, that is not public. That requires logins. So when we talk about DHIS2, we need to understand that there are layers to the system itself and what might be made available. But like the public data could help drive to know whether we should be asking for very specific data, right? Any others? I just have five folks. And thank you, Kokoda, for describing that. Yes, so public data sets are things that are freely available, right? Without restriction. Can anyone tell me a place that is very, very close to our hearts that has freely available data that you can actually access? I'll give you a hint. It starts with M. And yes, Vector Atlas is one of them. So Vector Atlas is hosts publicly available, extracted from the literature data from mosquitoes. And it hosts a variety of all kinds of information about mosquitoes, from resistance to what kind of mosquito to how it was collected. But it's a public source that anybody can go to vectoratlas.org, I think, and find that data and look at a map. And Babalola, if you have the link, please post it in the chat room for everybody because it's a really good resource. Yes, thank you. We are in the MAP ECR program. Did you know that MAP is a public resource? in itself. If you go to malariaatlas.org, you will see on the top right a data point, a data tab. If you click that, that is publicly available global maps at your fingertips of malaria, and you can see the maps going all the way back to the year 2000. We typically try and update these every year or so. So they're probably one of the most of like readily updated data sets when it comes to malaria epidemiology. Yes, IR Mapper. IR Mapper, I think, is now in collaboration with Malaria Threat Maps, and they map out the insecticide resistance. So they put all the trials that are looking at insecticide resistance, or sorry, not trials, the entomological surveillance information. Yes, national health portals of the MOH. They have loads of resources, and I'm pretty sure this isn't just a Tanzania thing. Like, I'm pretty sure Rwanda has it, Kenya has it, Uganda has it, any country you can think of has it. But there's typically national health portals that will give you general information about the health system or the diseases that are important to that health system. I'm going to add to that one. Sometimes they publish a report. So don't knock it till you try it, but that's a public resource. When there's a published report, they typically hold a lot more information than you think. So not all information has to be a website. Sometimes it can just be a PDF report that you can extract information from. But typically, once it's published, it's public. Any others? I only see six folks here. If you're really struggling with putting it up on the Slido, you're welcome to unmute yourself and tell us of a public source that you know.
Hi, Punan.
Hi, Jerson.
Hi. So, there's another source but from Brazilian. Is a good one.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know that we're in Africa, but sometimes when you want to analyze some data, but it's from Brazil. I forgot the name of the system, but
Is this INSE or something like that?
no, no, no.
Okay.
There's, I'm not sure, but maybe if I search I do a quick search, I can share.
Yeah, I'm sure because I'm not surprised Brazil has so much public data because Brazil has been actually very good with leading a lot of like analytics. And so they recognize like making some of their resources publicly available is really, really helpful. For example, technically in Kenya, we've got opendata.gov.ke. So it is a government portal that publishes all open data. So it doesn't publish the fine scale data, but it publishes, for example, shape files. It publishes aggregate data on like when COVID was happening, you could get aggregate COVID cases there so that people could do different analytics. And they made it open access because they wanted people with analytic skills to really participate with using the data for evidence generation. GBIF, yes. Let me see if I remember what that stands for. And whoever posted it, please open your mic and let me know if like I'm getting it wrong. I think it's Global Biodiversity for Insects. Is that correct? If anyone can help me out with what GBIF stands for.
Global Biodiversity Information Facility.
Ah, okay. And what does it host typically?
It is for mostly for species compositions, like if you have malaria mosquitoes, dengue mosquitoes, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so it's a great resource for the mosquito side of things.
Yes.
Wonderful. Any others that we can think of, or are we slowly waning? I'm gonna add one that I'm really surprised hasn't come up yet. Uh, SAS Brazil. Okay, cool. Thank you, Jerson, for that one. So, how many of you realize that the DHS program, which hosts the Demographic Health Survey and the Malaria Indicator Survey that we're all very, very familiar with, it's technically public data because they publish reports, right? But you can also just register yourself and get access to the fine scale data as well. So technically, it's a freely available public source of information that gives you health data. Yes, Malaria Gen. Malaria Gen has a public source to give you genomic information about malaria. We also have UNICEF. UNICEF hosts the multiple indicator cluster surveys. Those are public surveys that can be used for anything, and they collect a lot of different health information. World Bank has the Living Standard, the LSMS, the Living Standard Measure Survey. They don't collect all the health indicators, but they collect some health indicators. They typically are measuring how good you live. So they're more economics based, but they have some health indicators in there. All right. I'm gonna close this little poll and move on to the next subject, all right? So thank you guys, by the way, for all of these great resources. And please, again, stop me if you, or just add it to the chat if you know other public sources, because all of these can be helpful to someone on in this call. You never know, right? So here are some public sources that I'm a little bit more familiar with that I wanted to share with you, right? The first one is I mentioned there's the DHS program. The DHS program was originally a USAID funded project, and it's been around since 1985. I don't know if anybody knew that. But it's been doing surveys, and they really ranked up kind of in the 2000s more so. But they've been doing surveys since technically 1985. And they have a software that we're going to play with today called Stat Compiler. So there's two kind of entryways into DHS. The first one is if you just want to publicly look, they typically publish a report. So whenever they do a survey, they make a report that describes what they learned from that survey. That is a public resource that anyone can go and extract. You typically will find that the maps that are in those reports is what you typically find in a national strategic plan as well for malaria. So if they've done testing in the survey, they will normally create a map of the malaria testing, either in RDT or microscopy, that represents prevalence. And typically that's one way of seeing information. The other way is to use Stat Compiler. So Stat Compiler is its own interactive dashboard that allows you to look at the different surveys and compare them. And you can do this across countries, you can do this within countries. Sometimes, depending on the indicator, you can break it from national to the provincial level or the administrative one level, and you can look at all the indicators that they collected over time. The second resource, as I mentioned, is because we are MAP, I'm going to put MAP. So MAP always publishes on their website existing modeled risks of malaria, and we typically publish three kinds of indicators. We publish prevalence, we publish incidence, and we publish mortality. Our maps are typically starting always with prevalence. We also publish a whole bunch of other indicators. We publish intervention coverages, we publish travel times, so how accessible things are, but typically to a health facility or to a city to represent resources. We also house a lot of old information. So we have an old surface, for example, that describes housing that we're currently updating. We have some of the old vector atlas maps of different kinds of distributions of different mosquitoes. So there is a lot of information that can be just found on the Malaria Atlas website. If you are more familiar with R, we have the Malaria Atlas R package, which I actually highly recommend to use the R package versus the website. It's been a minute since I've used the website myself because I typically use the R package. And then, as someone mentioned, WHO, one of the best resources on WHO is the World Malaria Report. So, this is an annual report that comes out every year. The last one was 2025. And it's just a great resource to find national trends and burden estimates. Um, it compiles lots and lots of different information, including the estimates from MAP, but it also includes reporting values from different countries from their own DHIs too in itself. Then we also have the IHME, that's the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, and they publish what we call the global burden of disease. So this is now a holistic view on every kind of disease and how much it attributes to the burden in the world. So what they typically publish is risk and mortality and what we call DALYs. And I'm hoping that you were taught DALYs in your epidemiology class, but it means disability adjusted life years. And so what they do is they pull together loads and loads of different information about loads and loads of different diseases, and they attribute how much of each disease is within kind of the population. Sorry, did someone have something to say? Oh, sorry. I thought I heard someone. I thought they had a question. All right. Where was I? And then as I mentioned, someone mentioned really great the Ministry of Health, right? And typically, if you go to Ministry of Health, most ministries of health have websites. And they publish a lot of reports on them. So sometimes you can get some really good detail from an annual report. And then the last one I'm going to add here is another kind of report, which I'm not sure if they are going to continue, but this is the President Malaria Initiative reports. So PMI, when they were in different countries, because it was USAID funded, they used to always put up what they call an operational plan or a MOPS, Malaria Operational Plan. And in those MOPS, there is a lot of information they pull together because they are basically trying to make a case to the US government about how they're going to use US taxpayer money to help reduce malaria, right? And so they have to put in to convince basically Senate, um, like country information, country context, how the program works, what are the trends in the country. So you actually can get so much information from a PMI MOPS. Unfortunately, the last ones I believe are from 2024, but that's not that far away. So they still have quite a lot of good value, at least in these upcoming years. And who knows, maybe we'll get a new one from the US government that includes that kind of information. So, why have I told you about all this information? Is I'm going to now play with you a little demonstration. Is we are going to play or pretend in a role play that we are supporting country planning. All right. So, we are a support staff that is helping a national malaria program prepare their next strategic plan. Now, we don't have access to any of their data. We are just told they want to know what is their malaria burden, where is it concentrated, who is most affected, and how could we help stratify them for country planning. So as a team, I'm going to walk you through maybe how I would do it a little bit about just doing a rapid scan from public information about helping them to answer this question. Now, remember when I started here, I said there's nothing that's going to be perfect, right? So we are going to try our best to give the national program as much information from the public resources that we may have. So before we begin, another poll that I would love you guys. So I'm hoping you have not put your phones down. So please take out your phones again and scan the QR code or join slido.com and use that hashtag. But I would love to know what indicators from you, from whatever you've learned, measures what we call burden. If this is not working for you, please just unmute yourself and tell and just speak out about what indicators measure burden. Incidence, yeah, that's a great measure, right? Like, so can anyone unmute themselves and tell me what the definition of incidence is? Let's pretend I have no idea. I'm a brand new person to the world of public health. What is incidence? What is incidence?
For malaria, for example, incidence is the number of cases per thousand population.
Yeah, exactly. That's the measure, right? The number of cases per 1,000 population. Um, its definition is typically the number of new cases that you see of a disease, right? So it's something that we measure over time, and it's something that we try and standardize across the population in itself. That's why its metric is cases per 1,000 population. And it's 1,000 because we always multiply it by 1,000 to make sense. And then I see a big fat prevalence. Who can tell me what prevalence is?
Prevalence is the number of both old and new cases at a
Is the
specific point in time.
Yeah, great. So the number of new cases at a specific point in the year. It's the number, yes, the number of infections of that disease at a certain point in the population. So incidence and prevalence are quite different, right? They sound really similar because incidence is number of new cases, prevalence is number of infections that you see in a population. They're both population, but they're slightly different, right? And the key thing here is at a point in time. So prevalence measures what we call the underlying transmission in a population. So its denominator is however many people you have tested, and that ideally comes from a sample size, and that sample size represents what you think is happening in your population, right? It's not something that we check over time. It's not about the new cases. It's just about at that point, if I test people in my population, this is how much infection I should expect to find, right? And then the last one, mortality. So who can tell me what mortality is? It's so morbid, but yes, who can tell me what mortality is?
But mortality is just like the death rate from a particular disease. In this case,
Yeah,
probably malaria.
exactly. Thank you, Babalola. Exactly that. It's the number of deaths that you're seeing or a death rate that you're seeing of a disease, like you said, for malaria. So yeah, these are great measures of burden. I'm going to now ask you guys to unmute yourself and tell me where would you find prevalence data? Like if you were to put a source to it, where exactly are you going to find it?
Prevalence. Sorry, Puna, in terms of source or how? Surveys.
Surveys, yeah, cross-sectional surveys, right? They would be a source of information. Hopefully they're public. Babalola, did you have anything to add?
I was just thinking that probably from published literatures as well.
Absolutely, yes. There are a lot of times where people will do some kind of study in epidemiology, and maybe they've actually collected an estimation of prevalence, and that's a public source. So thank you. That's a great catch that you can also get it from literature, if you're lucky. Can anyone tell me where you might where you might get mortality?
Can I guess Ministry of Health?
Yeah, absolutely. Ministry of Health has to, I don't know if it's a mandate or not, but typically they should be publishing a mortality rate. They might not publish it for every single disease, but you could at least know that your mortality, meaning the all-cause death rate, meaning depending, doesn't matter of which disease, should be published on Ministry of Health's website. I'm actually going to give you a different resource. Something World Bank also typically publishes that. So there is also resources out there that will give you a national level that is similar to the Ministry of Health as well. They might not go into specific diseases. So this is where if you think of a good catch, like I mentioned, you want to think of if I get a source, is it giving me the specificity of information I need? Because we could be going to the Ministry of Health and it's giving me an all-cause death rate, but maybe I need a malaria death rate. And then I need to start digging for a little bit more information. And then lastly, incidents. I see that Taiwo mentioned that we could get from routine surveillance data. Yes, absolutely, we could get it from routine surveillance data. However, we need access to routine surveillance data. And so if we don't have access to routine surveillance data, how would we go about that? Anyone? How would you find incidence data if you don't have access to the portal of DHIS2? Just ask for it. Yes, we've got Jerson here who will just ask for data. Thank you, Jerson. You're right. I mean, technically, you could just ask for it, but there are certain sensitivities to it, right? Is you like you can't just ask and they'll receive, like you need to prove why you need it. Annabelle Victoire, great. Yes, cohort studies, right? Maybe someone in the literature has followed people and that actually gives you cases over time. So that could give you an incidence value of a certain region, but maybe you can use that to help give you some insight about what you might think generally is going on, right? Literature, publish reports. Absolutely. So there's all sorts of different places. WHO, absolutely. We talked about the World Malaria Report, right? The World Malaria Report publishes national level incidence rates. So if you wanted to look at a trend at a national level, you can at least showcase that this is what we expect your trend is going to be. It might not be able to go subnational, but it can go at least national. WHO also, as part of their report, puts out what the country has reported. So you might want to do a comparison on the two things, right? So I am going to now exit out of this because now that you guys have shown me that you know loads and loads of cool resources, you are going to help me fill this table up because I have no clue how to fill this table up. So I need help. So please unmute yourself and help me. But we just had a discussion about this, right? Like, so remember the question, I'm going to go back to this, is what is malaria burden? Where is it concentrated? Who is most affected? And how can I stratify my country for planning? So remember, we're helping the program, but we're not given any data yet. So we have to help them by showcasing public data can help at least answer parts of these questions. So if I break down those questions, I'm breaking them down into these kind of sectors. So we kind of answered what is burden, right? So useful evidence to look for, you said incidence, mortality, and prevalence, right? And we said the possible sources of this is WHO, is Ministry of Health, is surveys, and I'm going to put specifically surveys like the DHS, MIS, even the mix. Sometimes you get lucky that they did testing. Is there any other pieces of burden, any other sources that you can think of that might come to mind?
I think malaria trust.
Yeah, because we publish all three indicators. Yes, it could be modeled, but it is still a source of public information. Now, what evidence is useful to look at when you're saying that you want to answer the question about the where? Where is burden concentrated? So what kind of information would be helpful to help answer the where question?
Geospatial maps.
Yeah, geospatial maps. Can you maybe help me with a bit more specificity there, like a map of the whole country?
Maps. Heat map.
Heat maps? Heat maps of a whole country?
Yes.
Okay. So we should have one value for a whole country. That's how I've understood
No,
it.
yeah, but I don't want to guess. So, yeah.
So if I want to know where in the country something is concentrated, maybe I want something that's lower than a whole country, right? So maybe I might want a region or what we call a province, or what are they called in Tanzania? County? No. Council?
Districts.
Districts. Thank you. Right? Because
We call it states in Nigeria.
we call it states in Nigeria. Thank you. States in Nigeria. I think it's provincial in Mozambique. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Jerson. But yeah, like if we want to know where something is concentrated, geospatial or someone said predictive maps. Predictive maps, I'm going to put that both in the same place, right? Is basically the place to go. The key term here is a map, right? Whether it's a predictive map or it's a map of your raw data, it's a map that's going to help you know where something's concentrated. So I'm going to bold here that it's a map that's valuable. And now where would I find this piece of information? Where do you think I could find this piece of information, like the maps, whether they're predictive or
Maybe
they're just heat maps? Yes?
maybe on national strategy plans.
Absolutely. National strategic plans. And most national strategic plans are published. So I'm going to say national strategic plans for malaria. So absolutely. Almost every strategic plan has to have a map involved because they have to say where their malaria is to build a strategy. Any other sources that you can think of?
Map.
Map, yes. Any others?
WHO.
WHO, yes. So part of the World Malaria Report publishes that. NMCP reports, absolutely. Sometimes you get an annual report that has to have a map to say this is what happened. It could just be the raw data from DHIS too, but it's still a good map to help guide you, right? All right. I
There's a
feel like
source
we've got
called World. There's a source called World Data. I don't know if you know it.
absolutely, yes. World data is a very useful resource, right? They have sometimes these heat maps that are public. Awesome. So I feel like we've got plenty of sources there that we can go and search for. Now, how do I know who? The question of who is affected. What kind of evidence would I want to know about the who?
Maybe age and gender disaggregation.
Age, gender? Yeah, absolutely. So let's put our epi hat on, right? Like what age ranges affect malaria? Does it affect everybody equally? Like whether I'm 35 or I'm 5 years old?
Oh no. Children under 5 are more predisposed.
Yeah, so we might want to actually focus on certain indicators that look at our vulnerable populations, right? Like under fives. There's also pregnant women, right? That
Pregnant women.
sometimes can be affected. Like you're saying, gender. We're seeing loads of studies that are saying that maybe malaria is different in men versus women. So this is great. Now, where would I find that piece of information, do you think?
Do
Sorry,
you
can we,
check?
Yes, Taiwo?
can, yeah, can we add urban and rural evidence in the,
Absolutely. And this is so important for Nigeria, right? Is Nigeria in itself is a very urban landscape, and there's actually a lot of malaria in urban centers. And so dividing it and knowing that difference, because a lot of the time when we talk about malaria, people say it's a rural disease, but it kind of depends on the context, right? We need to know that difference. So who is affected might depend on where you live, right? Any others?
Immunocompromised people?
Immunocompromised people. Um, I'm trying people. I think I spelled it right. You can tell me if I didn't. Yeah, absolutely. And tell us, Babalola, why are immunocompromised people we should like really focus on?
Okay, for instance, people with HIV.
Sure. So, e.g., HIV. Does HIV interact quite a lot with malaria in Nigeria?
Just for some isolated studies.
Okay. Yeah. So again, this is really valuable information, right? Is like thinking about who you want to target is important to the question for stratification. Now, where would I find this information? Displaced people. Thank you. Yes, for DRC, this is super important, right?
housing? Can we put housing?
Housing, sure. Is housing a who problem or it's a factor that affects people?
It is more of a factor.
Yeah, so the question is more around who. However, housing is very important to maybe consider as a possible intervention, right? If you have a
Yeah,
better house,
yeah.
you
Mm,
maybe don't get as many mosquitoes, so
mm.
it might be affecting it in a different way, right? All right. Now, before
For
we continue,
example, oh, sorry, I was saying that for one of the useful evidence of who is infected, for example, in Swatini, there's this, we found like farmers, they
yeah.
are more affected.
So high risk groups, e.g. farmers, right? Like if I remember, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm just still going to say it. Like if I remember correctly, I think South Africa was complaining that like apparently a lot of malaria comes from weed farming, which is illegal farming technically, or gray area farming. But they're technically a high risk group because the people who work on the weed farms come from areas that are high risk in malaria. So they travel really far to work in these illegal farms because they make lots of money and it's seasonal. So yeah, seasonal high risk groups is really important. So I feel like we've covered really well the who is affected. I would love you to tell me sources where I could find this piece of information. So we've got quite a lot. We've got age, including these kind of special populations. We've got gender, we've got urban and rural, we've got being able to identify immunocompromised. I see, Victoire, you've mentioned DHIS2, but do you mean the public facing DHIS2? Because remember, we're looking for public sources of information. So if we don't have a login to DHIS2, where would we go? IHME, yes. I'm going to say here public
Um,
source. IHME, yes, IHME breaks things down in certain places that definitely can have that piece of information. WHO, yeah, sure, WHO. Um, I'm going to put back this DHS and MIS. Yes, thank you, Babalola. Because actually, they collect a lot of information, especially pertaining to age. They collect information around occupation. So maybe that could help you with defining the high-risk populations. They collect gender, they collect urban and rural. If it's a DHS, they typically collect other diseases. So maybe you could get your immunocompromised people that way. Scientific manuscripts, yes, scientific published manuscripts, absolutely. Where would you find displaced people? Like, how would you get information about displaced populations? MSF reports, yes, MSF reports, IOM reports. There's a place called Relief Web that sometimes puts out reports. And then I'm going to add a very potentially controversial one, the National Bureau of Statistics. And every country's got one of these, right? And they normally have open face portals where you can maybe get some information about populations at large in your country. And then maybe you could use kind of that and try find a way to tie it to public information. So it's a bit of a stretch about malaria specific, but it could give you maybe a bit of the denominator problem, right? Like saying, okay, like there are a lot of people who are displaced in the country I'm looking at. So that might have implications on your stratification, right? So this is wonderful. I'm gonna scoot this bit higher. Oh my God, you guys are very good detectives. I feel like you're catching like massive red snappers and not those little changus that like Susan likes to eat. Is she on this call? Okay, she's not gonna berate me. Um, so we need to fill out. So we all know that malaria has loads and loads of interventions. We've got a very big toolbox, and that is naturally going to affect what burden we see, right? So what kind of interventions, what evidence is useful to look for when it comes to interventions? And answering the question, are interventions reaching people? ITN coverage, absolutely. So how many people actually got a net? And someone added use, absolutely, because you might have a net, but if you don't use it, kind of defeats the purpose of having the net, right? Because the mosquito can get to you. Any other ones?
Chemoprophylaxis coverage.
Chemoprophylaxis coverage. Someone wrote here malaria case management, and that is kind of, it covers the chemoprophylaxis. So thank you, because mostly I can't spell prophylaxis. If anyone can help me with that one. Don't know. I think it's kind of that. Plus testing. Yeah. I see someone, thank you, Victoire. Larval source management. Many places do kind of in small pockets, but larval source management, like especially urban areas, like Tao said, right? This could be very valuable. IRS, exactly. Spray campaigns. So spray places, and this can really have a massive impact. Like you can drop your malaria so quickly. Spatial emanators, okay? Spatial emanators. So I know I'm going to put vaccines because I know that someone's going to come up with them. But where would we find all of this information about all of these different cool toolboxes that we know are affecting malaria? Because we know that coverage is not the same, right? Like we know not everybody gets to get a sprayed house. Yeah, we can go to MAP. Absolutely. We make these modeled estimates. We can get them from WHO. We can get them from gray literature. We can get them from the WMR report. I think that's what you meant, Victoire. Absolutely. So there are many places that you might, MIS, exactly. Thank you, Babalola. MIS's, the Malaria Indicator Survey, typically collects a lot of information about this. So almost every DHS and MIS will have information about nets, and they'll have information about spray, and they'll have information about case management. The thing that's not always there is the testing of malaria, because you need extra money to test people. But the interventions are typically covered. Vector Atlas, yes, let me write this out properly. Vector Atlas. So they can help you with information, especially around the vector control components. Absolutely. All right. I feel like we've got a good amount of I'm going to put PMI reports here because PMI typically funds quite a lot of interventions. And so sometimes they actually publish where they are going to be doing interventions, and that can be a really helpful map to see, or even description, and you can put it on a map. So now that we've got all of these pieces, how would you go about stratifying your country? What would be the first step you would think about when you want to tell a program, um, or support a program with stratifying their country for interventions for malaria to reduce malaria? You would want to think of high burden provinces. So the key thing there is burden, right? We want to measure of burden. So this could be prevalence and incidence. It can be even mortality if you want, sure. Is there any other pieces of information you might want to stratify on? If we have, let me give an example. If we have a vector control like bed nets, and we know not every bed net, we know there are different types of bed nets, uh, and we might have resistance to some, meaning some won't work in some places. Would we not want to know something about that? Climate zones. That is a really great one, Witness. Yes, maybe climate is something important to think about. Why do we care about climate? Can anyone tell me why does malaria care about climate? IR profiles. Thank you. But why do we care about climate?
I think
What?
we care. Can I speak a little?
Mhm.
Okay, we care about climate because we know, as recently we always say about climate change and everything, and well, especially those extreme events such as rainfall, they facilitate the growth of those, how do you call it? Mosquitoes. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. So we know that we know intuitively when it rains, we have more mosquitoes because they're breeding, which means that in turn, more things that can bite you, which will transmit malaria, which means more sickness. Climate can also help us with thinking about seasonality. So what we just described is rainfall, right? But rainfall sometimes falls heavy, sometimes falls less. And there's some of these chemoprophylaxis that we target seasonally. So, for example, there are a lot of countries that do what we call seasonal chemo prevention, or there are countries that are thinking about the deployment of vaccines with the seasonality of of the disease. And so climate could probably help us with defining, because it's the underlying driver of the mosquito dynamic, it could help us with describing the seasonality of the disease, especially if we don't have it publicly, right? Insecticide resistance for each. Okay, I hope you got, if you don't mind if I wrote profiles, because it describes generally. But you made a very good point. How do you know which ones are the dominant vectors? Maybe we need vector distribution maps, right? We might need to know if
Exactly.
there's a difference across them. Yes, we need to know what geographic level we're supposed to do it at. So we might need geographic information, right? Absolutely. So I'm going to delete this because you guys have clearly helped me fill this. But we've got lots and lots of information here. So like you can see that when you stratify a country or you want to help someone consider it, you might not, yes, burden is really important, but there are other pieces and layers that can also add a lot of value to helping someone know where to put a certain intervention with malaria. Now, where would I find all this information? This beautiful information. We've got a very new one here. We've got climate. So where would I find climate information?
from satellite databases.
Yeah, satellite imagery could help. And in case that folks don't know, you can find a lot of it on Google Earth engines. Satellite imagery, so that's for climate. TMA, so I'm hoping that Nigeria has a Nigerian meteorological agency and Mozambique. Oh my God, I know it, but I know it's not Mozambique Met Agency. It's like it's another one. But Jerson, if you can tell us what the Mozambique one is, I would love to know it.
It's called INAM,
Ah, that's
INAM,
it. E
NA,
NAME?
no, just M.
M.
No, ANAM.
A N like that?
Yes,
Okay,
like
perfect.
National Institute of Meteorology.
All right, awesome. So yes, Met agencies. Typically, if Met agencies publish reports, maybe you could get it from that way. But Witness, you would Witness and Dowdy, you can tell us if like there are ways of publicly accessing data from TMA without permissions, things without permission.
For TMA, we need permission and this contribution also.
Oh, so these are not public sources.
For TMA, it's not public, so you have to go there because for us, forecast is free, but data you have to contribute.
But oh, so the forecasts are free.
Yes.
So forecasts are public. Okay. Yeah, so ERA 5, all of that is satellite imageries or remote sensed imageries. Thank you. Um, sorry, I ran down too far. Okay. World climb, yes. I'm gonna I'm gonna put that all in one space, right? Reanalysis data. Because it really kind of like ERA 5, World Climb, Terra Climate, they're all reanalysis databases that come from satellite imageries and remote sensed. Even the like, if you meant the Chelsea one, I think there's also like a Bristol one. All right, but we're talking a lot about climate. The reason I'm not talking about burden is because you kind of already said it here. So we all know that burden can come from WHO, MOH, surveys, MAP. Um, where would I get IR profiles and vector distribution maps? We have said it. I just want to see if everyone's listening. Yeah, Vector Atlas IR Mapper. VA IR Mapper. Yes, these are really great resources, right? Map, surveys, MOH. I'm just adding all of the ones that you've mentioned up above. Um, and we can typically find geographic information from a National Bureau of Statistics as well. So a lot of the time, shapefiles for countries are hosted there. So this is amazing. Can I just give you guys a round of applause? Like, look at how many sources you guys have suggested. There are clearly a lot of places you can get information before we even try and get access to DHIS2, right? This is wonderful. Um, so I am going back to my presentation because I want to talk about the last part about a good catch, right? So we have done kind of most of the components of the how to get a good catch. We had a question, we thought of the information of the indicator that would describe it or help us, and we thought of where to get it. But how do we know it's a good source of information, right? Now, when we are talking about information or capturing that information, we've said a couple of things, right? Is like we might want to capture things in a visual way. Like we might want to think of a map or a graph, like with a line that's telling us the trend of something, or a table that describes some piece of information that's valuable, like the age disaggregations or the gender differences, right? Um, or a statistic to say that 1 in 10 children might die of malaria in said country. Like, so finding pieces of information, you want to always remember a couple of things, right? It's not just about finding it, it's about making sure that it's usable. So when we find information, we always want to think about where we got it from, so the source. And a lot of the times, it's really important to put the source information there. So the table that you guys all built for me, right? We talked about possible sources, but once we actually find the information, we want to say where it came from. So if we find a trend of incidents, for example, and it came from WHO, we want to make sure we source and say that it's from the WHO World Malaria Report, for example. We also want to make sure that we capture as much metadata. Now, metadata is information that comes with data, right? So, for example, in the Malaria Atlas package or in MAP's website, when you download our global Plasmodium falciparum parasite rate maps, we actually publish with them a little piece of information about the year that it came out in. So when we last modeled it, and we give a bit of information about what that indicator is described. So we say that this is a measure of Plasmodium falciparum parasite rate globally at a pixel level. It's modeled in a geospatial model. Like we have a little bit of metadata or information that adds to the map that you see, right? But types of things that you want to make sure that you're finding is description of the indicator to make sure it's the right indicator, the geography. So is it the right geography that you're looking at? What year was it published? Because we don't want to take a map that was 2008 and we're in 2026, because we know that lots of things have changed for malaria since then. Is it the right population? Like, we don't want to be taking a map on malaria incidents that's in prisoners, right? Like, has been done before, by the way, my friends. Um, it does not describe the general population, right? So we want to understand the information that comes along with the data. And then lastly, we want to ask ourselves, does it help us answer that question? So a great example is if we took a national map of malaria. Let's say we took Nigeria and it says the prevalence is 35%. Does it help answer all the questions? Maybe not, right? Like maybe it helps answer the burden question, but it doesn't help us answer the where things are concentrated question, right? Because it just gives us one figure. And so we want to question, and remember in the catch, I mentioned we also want to make sure that we're thinking about the gap. So a gap in a national data is that it won't tell you where things are concentrated within the country. So it's always important to think about the evidence you capture and then making sure you're noting down all these extra pieces of information about where you got it from, what does it represent. So describe the information that you find, right? And so describing it, you might want to think about a couple of things. You might want to think about, is it recent? So what date did you get it from? What geography level is it, especially when it comes to stratification? What does it actually define? Like, what's its definition? Like I said, in MAP, we are very specific to say Plasmodium falciparum parasite rate. The reason we say that is because there are 3 other parasites that could transmit malaria, right? There's Vivax, malariae, and ovale, and they all contribute a certain proportion, but we don't have that in the model that is described. And that's why we put that information very specifically in that indicator. What population? You guys all said great ones, right? Like, is it representing all age? When we publish the MAP global surfaces, we always say Plasmodium falciparum parasite rate in ages 2 to 10, because that is the population that we are describing. The reason we do 2 to 10 is because we assume that the largest burden of malaria is within this age range. And there's some really great literature out there. I will publish it like in the announcements. It's a paper by David Smith in the early 2000s, I think 2007, where he went through the literature and identified actually that like a large proportion of malaria is between ages 2 to 10. And you can find that in the literature. Comparable. Is it really comparable across space and time? So if I get incidents from DHIS2 and then I get incidents from WHO from the World Malaria Report, can I compare those two incidences when they come from two different sources and they might even come from two different inputs? So questioning like if it's comparable. And then lastly, and this is really cautionable more for modeled information, right? Is knowing all the things that you can't see. So if you take a survey, remember a survey is done at a certain time. So it may represent, for example, a high transmission season or a low transmission season. And it's important if you're just taking that data raw to remember that if you drew a straight line and it suddenly went up, maybe that survey was done in a high transmission season and the rest of them were done in dry seasons where it's low. And that's why you're seeing the up. So remembering the context, if you're looking at routine surveillance data that you have access to, thinking about any noise that could be in that data, missingness information. If you're looking at model data, like the map data, have you ever considered the credible intervals around them? Because we might be saying Kinshasa has 80% malaria, but that could be within 20 to 100% prevalence, which is really large. So it means it might not be 80%. It could be actually much less. So thinking about the statistics behind those estimates as well. I also want to caution you that there are a lot of times this is going to happen to you, that sources are going to disagree. And I would encourage you not to hide it because it's really important that you bring it to light because sometimes there can be experts in the room that can help you think about which one would be more valid compared to the other. And you as a new analyst may not know that. So being really explicit and clear is really, really important. And naming that difference can really help you in a situation. All right. Now, well, we've kind of done this, right? I wanted to put you to the test and I wanted to open a portal and see if we can get a certain indicator. So I am going to show you two portals here, right? And we're going to fill in two of these things. We're going to fill in PFPR and we're going to fill in IT and use, but we're going to fill in all these other pieces of information. So I am going to do it in two ways. Now you should be able to see my Google Chrome. And for PFPR, I'm going to show you how to grab a map from the map website. And I decided to choose Mozambique for this. So if you are on the map website, and we're going to type this together, right? You can go to malariaatlas.org. You will land on our homepage. And if you come all the way to the right, you will find this click button, this tab called data, and it will take you to our data portal. Now, I'm really hoping you have good internet because it does need good internet, but the landing page is the global trend of incidence for falciparum. And you can change this to the global trend of prevalence or the global trend of mortality. But we're not here just for the global trends. And remember, we're looking at the year 2024. That's the last year that's publicly available. And we're looking for Plasmodium falciparum, and we want to look at the rate. So let's say that I wanted to look specifically at a particular country. And I am going to go look for my good friend Mozambique, because that was what I was playing. Or should I do a different country? Should we do a different country? Let's do a different country. Let's look at Burkina Faso, because nobody here is from Burkina Faso, right? So now I have, when I click this, I get a line for Burkina Faso that's Burkina Faso, in comparison to the global trend. Now I can click this, I can click it here, and I can remove the line for global, which means I'm just getting the national line of the mortality rate of Burkina Faso. Now I can compare that to the infection prevalence, and I can get a trend line on the national infection prevalence for Burkina Faso. So I really like this map. I'm actually going to take a screenshot. So I don't know how to download this, which is terrible, but I'm gonna take a full screenshot of this map because it tells me what I wanted to know, which is the trend of malaria in a metric that I think is valuable. So there is my first screenshot. Now let me go and find my screenshot. Okay, and I am going to go back to my screen here, and I'm going to make a new slide, and I'm going to call this slide PFPR. I'm going to say Burkina. So I'm going to pretend that I'm doing this for the Burkina program. So this is great. So I found a line that tells me what prevalence overall has been, how it's been reducing in Burkina Faso. But it doesn't tell me concentration, right? So before I end, I'm going to say that I found this on map, and I'm going to say data portal, and I'm going to say it's PFPR in ages 2 to 10 years from 2000 to 2024, because that's what is represented on the map profile. And you know what? I'm also going to take the URL and I'm going to paste it in here so I know that it can be replicated again. All right. So like these are pieces of information that are kind of valuable because if someone came and saw this line, I haven't even said for Burkina Faso. If someone saw this line and you didn't tell them where you got it from, they could be like, is this a true line? I don't know. You could be crazy. Now it doesn't tell me the where part. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to subnational and I'm gonna filter for Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso. All right. And I'm gonna click all of these. Ah, did it click? Ooh, now I've got lots of lines. And I'm gonna take out my country level line. And now I have a incredibly confusing graph with so many lines that it just basically looks gray to me, right? Because it's way too many things on top of each other. And these are, it's taken more than that. Okay. I'm gonna click the lines then, because I think it's taken for some weird reason Democratic Republic of Congo. So I'm just gonna click all the Burkina Faso points, right? So that's all the Burkina Faso. Okay, that's much easier to see, right? So here's another visual I can pull that shows me the trends across different regions in Burkina Faso. So that could be helpful. Maybe, in fact, maybe I'll add this one back. Does that help? Can you see it? It's kind of in the middle there. So maybe what I'll do is I'll take a snapshot of this and I'll add it. And instead of having my one giant, maybe I'll add it below my giant trend line and it can tell me something about the trends like further broken down. We can think of it that way, maybe. Is that my screenshot? That's my screenshot. Okay. I took a terrible screenshot, but we will keep that screenshot. Okay. So I'm going to add this here. I'm going to add this to my lines. And again, maybe I'm going to make this smaller so that I can see everything. And I might make this one smaller, and I might make this one a little smaller, and I'll put this close here. And I'm going to copy and paste and make this one saying for regions in Burkina Faso. Technically, it's the same URL. Now that URL is super long, right? So you might just want to trim it and say just that. So if someone took this link, and I'll show it to you right now, and pasted it in just Google, it would go straight to the portal for data. So it's still useful because it's showing you where you got the information. It's just a little cleaner because otherwise you can get really messy URLs, right? That aren't particularly helpful. All right. So here's one example. Now, the second example I want to show you is if I wanted to get ITN use from what we call stack compiler. So stack compiler is, like I mentioned, the DHS program's portal to play with the data that they have. So I'm going to choose a country. We are doing, which country did we do? We did Burkina Faso, right? So I'm going to pull Burkina Faso and it will open and tell me which indicators I want to see. And I'm looking for ITN use, right? So I'm going to go to indicators by tag because maybe that will be easier to find. And I see insecticide treated nets, which is ITNs. And maybe the indicators, you can tell me which indicators make sense to you, right? I can say households with at least one mosquito net. Maybe that would be useful. Now, that's not distinguishing whether it's a long-lasting net or a standard net. It's just saying nets, right? I could also, if I wanted to know how many people use them, maybe something like the population who slept under any net last night. So that is that question of, did you sleep under a net last night, like they ask. Which other ones? Maybe children under 5 who slept under any net. So that's a metric that they measure. All right. I feel like that's enough metrics, right? So once you click your metrics or your indicators that you want to see, it opens every single survey that that DHS program has ever done. And it tells you what the surveys are, and it gives you the general values nationally for each of those indicators. Now, I don't know why that keeps happening. I could break that down to regions if I wanted subnational levels. And now I can see them at different regions broken down by different surveys. Now, this is a table which, as you break it down by region, can get a bit difficult to see. So maybe I want to see a line. Now let's see if line. Okay, so line doesn't give me the whole country. The bar charts don't give me the whole country. Interesting. Does it give me age in months? No. Ah, okay. So the bar chart gives me wealth quintiles and urbanicity. So maybe I might want to break it down by urbanicity by a bar chart. Does it give me age? No. Does it give me sex? No. But it gives me urbanicity. Okay, interesting. So I could maybe take a bar chart of that, or I could take a line graph of that, or I could take a map. And typically what they are going to show you is a national map of the latest survey. So this typically represents the latest survey that they've done. And yes, I can break it down by region. So I can take, and this is the household with at least one mosquito net. Maybe I want the one of the children who slept under any net, or population who slept under any net. So this could be a really nice, and I'm going to say export map image. It's going to export for me this kind of map. I'm going to say print map. So here's an example of a map I could use to say what ITN use looks like. Okay, and that is, I'm saving that map. I'm going to open that map now, and I'm going to paste it on a new slide. So ITN use, maybe I'll call it. And here is a slide. I didn't do a very good job of zooming properly in, right? Now, you can see that some of it is what the moment I zoomed, the moment I like reduced the size, I kind of lost information. So you might want to like recreate some of that information that's there. So if it's in the picture, it's great. It's telling you what the information is. It's telling you percentage of de facto household populations who slept under any net before the survey. It's telling you the source and it's telling me when I extracted it. What it's not telling me is which survey this has come from. So I might need to put a text box here and say source, stat, compiler, ITN, yeah, I'll describe it again. Population who slept under any net last night in MIS. And what was the last MIS they had? You might want to come back here and check. It's a DHS actually. So DHS 2021. So DHS 2021, right? And you might want to just correct me if I'm wrong, because you want to maybe make sure that that is the survey. If there's any place that you can look to find and make sure that you know which survey it's come from, that would be kind of important. All right. I am going to stop here because I actually now want you guys to try and do this. So, can you still see my slides?
Yes.
All right. I'm
Okay.
going to just redo it again. Ta-da. All right. So now it's your turn to play this game. We are going to give you 30 minutes to play this game of stratification where you are going to help a country to figure out what is their malaria burden, where is it concentrated, who is most affected, and how could you stratify the country for planning. We are going to take 30 minutes to do this exercise to fish for evidence. They are going to be about 4 or 5 of you in a team. We would like you to have a team lead. So pick a team lead in your team. Pick 2 people who can at least do note taking. For note taking, these are people who are helping to put things out on a slide, and then someone who is going to come back and present to us. All right. I want you to create up to 5 slides that are going to describe kind of the burden, the geography, maybe some information about interventions that are important, and the stratification logic. And then each team is going to get about 4 to 5 minutes just to present back what sources they found. I'm also going to bear in mind AI is not going to be permitted for this exercise. If you do use AI, we are going to cancel you. I'm sorry, but we want you guys to think. However, that being said, you have physical humans that you can ask instead of AI. So you've got actual intelligence, not artificial intelligence. And these are your ambassadors. So for Tanzania, you have Ambassador Yasini Kokoda that is there to help support you in case you need certain information. He is not going to be your all answer. You still need to go do your research, but he may guide you to certain resources. For Nigeria, we have Ambassador Harriet Boya. And for Zambia, we have Ambassador Nema Kafwimi. All right. So we have already pre-assigned you to groups. This is intentional because we didn't want the Nigerians going to Nigeria and we didn't want the Tanzanians going to Tanzania. We want you to discover something new. All right. So with that in mind, we are gonna put you in breakout rooms now. So Nema, I might hand over to you if you can help us with putting everybody in breakout rooms. And this is gonna be 30 minutes long. So we'll see you in 30 minutes and I might just pop into different breakout rooms and see how you guys are doing.
Yeah, I've opened up the room, so you should have got a notification to join one of the rooms. And I'll put on a timer for the 30 minutes mark.
Awesome. See you guys in 30. Has everybody left? I can't actually see.
Yes,
Oh,
we have everyone in
everybody
the
left.
rooms.
Okay. Sorry,
Yes,
I
it's
went much
just,
longer than I thought.
yeah, I know, but I think they were interactive in the first portion of it, which is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I'm thinking for the room 3, we only have one person joining. Perhaps I
Oh,
can assign her its towel.
oh, maybe put her in Tanzania because she's
Yeah,
Nigerian.
yeah, okay.
Ah, so everybody else left from the
Except
Yes,
you
study
we
group. Okay.
yeah, we had Sylvia and Christine and Lebris, but
Yeah,
looks
yeah.
like they took off.
Yeah. Maybe
That was
reassign.
cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Hi,
I didn't follow
Susan.
100%, but the part that I was listening, it was very nice, very interactive. I hope they are not because we can't see their faces. I don't know if their
You
video.
can jump. So if you want me, we can make you a co-host and then you can do jump. You can room hop. Basically, once you're a co-host, you can
For
room
me,
hop.
I can't. Don't
Oh, I
make it.
don't think I can make you a co-host. I think Nima has to make you a co-host.
Okay, let me do.
No, don't make me a co-host. This was
Okay. Because then you can go in and out of different breakout rooms.
Did you
Yeah.
do the last group on purpose so that because they are not like the
Yeah.
main? Okay.
Yeah, because they're technically viewers, so I didn't know if they're all going to be there or not.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we said we'll do that. And then after that, they all come back and tell me what was hard and what wasn't hard.
Ah, yeah.
Oh shit, I didn't give them the presentation to fill in.
Ah,
For
so
Oh,
each of
also
the
like the
rooms.
slide for them to go and
Yeah,
fill.
there's a slide deck for them to fill. Let me go and give it to them.
yeah. You can also broadcast it.
Oh, how do I do that?
So if you go, you can see the open breakout rooms, right?
Actually, I don't see breakout rooms. How come I can't see break? Okay, yeah, I see breakout
Yes.
rooms.
Okay.
And then
At the very
broadcast.
bottom, yeah, you can
Okay.
broadcast as a message,
Hi, everyone.
and then they'll get it in the rooms.
Slides using this Google deck. Let us know if you don't have access. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So then we just won't see Zambia populated, which is fine.
Yeah, we'll have Tanzania and Nigeria.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go hop into one of the rooms and just see how they're doing.
Okay, then I'll hop into the other room.
Okay, I'm gonna join room 2.
All right, I'll join room 1. Bye, Susanna.
Bye, Susan.
Bye, bye, bye. Bye. Susanna. Peekaboo. I see you. Google, Google, Stocky, 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 Stocky. You're just alone, not your babies have not come back. Everyone is coming back soon. Hey Nema, how do you feel? I know we're a bit over time now, so it's gonna close in a minute.
Yeah.
Let them just close in a minute.
Yeah, my group had a bit of data, but they didn't get around to like creating a narrative. So I think I'll be interested to see how
Yeah,
they
the
could.
the Nigeria team stuck to just the two resources. So
Oh, uh-huh.
so this is what fascinates me about this, right? Is like you really see team dynamic because there's always going to be people who are less involved and people who are more involved. Uh, so yeah.
Yeah, I think the size as well, although it's a good exercise to have like five or 4 to 5 people, but I'm
Yeah,
wondering to sort of like force everyone to collaborate, making maybe smaller to teams of 3.
maybe, yeah, next time.
Yeah. Okay, people are
Um,
coming back.
welcome back. Hello, everybody. So, how stressed was everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, Firstly, just congratulations, right? It's not easy to put something together in 30 minutes. So you guys did a great job of like trying to do something in 30 minutes. People take months to make a stratification map. Just remember that, right? So congratulations for at least attempting to do this in the small teams with very new countries. I'm wondering if we can start with a little presentation from both teams. Um, can we start maybe with Team Tanzania? Because I see the presenter is going to be Tao. If you didn't have it complete, it's okay. Just present to us what you found and like information about it.
Okay. Can I share from my hand or you share?
I'm going to allow you to share so that you can have the autonomy of moving things.
Okay. Okay. Mm,
But if you're struggling, oh, perfect.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll be presenting on behalf of the Tanzania team. It was short, but we were able to put up something. So these were the proposed resources that we used. We were able to work on malaria atlas, then the the Tanzania National Health Portal. Okay, so for the infection prevalence, this was gotten from MAP, and it shows the trend from, don't know, trend, sorry. Oh, I'm trying to read caption. Okay. Yeah. This showed the trend from 2000 to 2024. There was actually a reduction. Then from the outpatient department, from this was gotten from the Tanzania National Health Portal. This is showing for each region of malaria cases from January to March 2026. So the blue bars represent children under 5, while red bars represent children above 5 years. Then we got this from we actually had issue trying to get the map from the map portal. So we are trying to zoom in and get for the all regions of the country in Tanzania. Then the next case, the other map is just showing the map from the Tanzania National Health Portal. Then we have for this was gotten from the stats compiler, and we have for the survey the under five mortality rates, the household that at least uses ITN, the household with at least one ITN or indoor spraying for the past 1 year. We have children under five that slept under net, and we have for pregnant women too. And okay, we had this. It was also gotten from the stats compiler. So these were the little things we were able to come up with. Thank you.
Awesome. Can I open up the floor if anyone has any questions for Team Tanzania? Any questions, any suggestions, comments, please, it's all open. This is a learning stage.
Mm.
So maybe I might start. So like it's really wonderful how much information you captured. I'm curious on your slide 6. You have two maps, but one of them doesn't have a description.
Yeah.
Yeah. I apologize I already apologize in the chat, so
Why you do this?
I missed.
Okay. The
No,
other one, the map on the right that does have a description, I can see that it represents January 2026 to
Yeah.
March. Is that correct?
Victor?
Yes.
And a question of curiosity would be, is that a high transmission setting time in Tanzania and that's why you wanted to capture it? Or is it just the default map was the last 3 months or
So
something like that?
it looks like they want to capturing the high setting in terms of incidence between January and March. So that on my side, I was saying maybe it's the dry season, the shorter one between January and March. So that's why they want to capture how it looks at the district level from across Tanzania.
Yeah, possibly. But could you use that map in stratification? Remember the original question was to help the country with making a stratification plan. So I'm really curious, would you recommend using these maps? And the answer could totally be yes or no.
Yes.
So why would you recommend using these maps?
Okay. For my side, when I look at this map, I'm looking at, you see these colors, it's indicating something. So from here, maybe I can narrow my study area, maybe this hotspot in this region, maybe I'm relating it with why is it red for my side.
And that's great. But let me challenge you. What if the map had different red spots from April to, I don't know,
May?
September or May? Yeah, the next 3 months. So what if the
Mm.
next 3 months had red in different places?
Mm. So I will ask myself, what is the peak malaria season in Tanzania? Then I will get the clue.
Yeah. So you might want to add more information, right? Like you didn't have time, which is fair. But there could be ways that this could be limiting or challenging, and it's important to recognize it and note it down, right? That this only represents 3 months of the year in a very seasonal disease. It could be representing the high season. It could be representing the low season, but we don't know. And so we could stratify, we could make a very different stratification depending on time that we use.
Yes.
Yeah. But this is great. And I'm really excited that you guys went to extra like data sources outside the two that were demoed. Like you went to the HMIS portal, which is amazing. Um, and I'm also curious to hear from the team, what was like the hardest part of this, besides time, obviously. Like there's never enough time to do things.
Beside time, I think to to download the data for the incidence data, the trend, it was easy. But going back to the map, searching where to download the map, it was completely crazy beside this time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why
Yeah,
we even
majorly.
forgot to put the link.
Sometimes there can come a point, and this is something really important with just general real life situations, right? Sometimes you have to let go of a certain source because it's just taking too long and you might need to find alternatives. So I posted actually in the chat that because I could see that you were having a struggle. But one alternative resource would have been to go and download the DHS or MIS report, and they have a map of prevalence in there. It's it's the reported prevalence, but it's already a pre-made map, and all you do is search for it, and then you take a picture and you put it there. Like it might have saved you more time than struggling with some technologies. So it's an important lesson learned is sometimes you need to know when to let go of a certain source if it's just taking, it might be the best source, but if you've got a time limit, and a lot of the times you might be in situations where you've got time limits for things, you might just need to go to the next best available. Because it's just going to be faster. So you also might want to weigh sometimes if time is of the essence to do the next best thing or to wait it out but not give all the information that might be important. But thank you, Team Tanzania. Any other suggestions from Team Nigeria? Um, who are all Tanzanians, by the way. So like you might actually have really good suggestions. All right, I'm going to take the silence as no. We've learned lots of lessons, but big round of applause to Team Tanzania. Now, can we please hear from the presenter of Team Nigeria?
Hi, I represent Team Nigeria. So first of all, it was a big challenge for us, especially mainly because of time.
Yeah, 30 minutes
Okay,
is not a lot, but I'm really impressed by how much you guys did in 30 minutes.
yeah. Okay, so those that mean the questions about Tanzania. First one, it was about the trend of malaria burden in Nigeria. So we found those data on Malaria Atlas, and from 20,000 to 2024, the trend of malaria incidence is to reduce, but from 2020, the incidence increased, and from there to now, the trend is to maintain. Going to ITN coverage, we found a figure about the current and projected ITN supply and coverage in Nigeria. So the trend also is to increase, but from 2021 to 2024, the trend is to reduce. And if you see the projection, it seems like it's to decrease. I think so. So didn't have but something that we found about Nigeria, this data is not subnational. So we didn't. It was a little bit challenging to filter the states, Nigeria states, to have the ITN coverage. So the question is how many people seek care for treatment at subnational level. So we didn't have enough time to look for that. And looking for mortality rate, we found also on Atlas project, and the trend is the trend of mortality per 100,000 people is to reduce in all the country. So that's how we found. I don't know, Kaiser, Annabelle, they have something else to add.
Nothing from my end. Just maybe the challenge we got from when we were looking the care seeking data set from the stats scanner. So it took us a lot of time and we are unable to complete it. I think this complements what Poonam was saying. Sometimes one data source might be good, but it takes you a lot of time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Other folks, maybe Team Tanzania, do you have any suggestions, questions, comments? So maybe I'll start. If you could go to your slide 17 with the bed nets. So we're going to ignore the forecast because it's not true, right? It's testing a scenario. But anything historical is based off data. And I'm really curious because you said it dropped in 2021. Could you maybe just take a little shot about why you think it might have dropped in 2021 in Nigeria? Just off the top of your head?
Maybe because of financial reasons, or maybe because of the increase of population. I don't know.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Or there was a giant pandemic that happened the year before that that could have affected supplies of certain commodities.
And might have been used for COVID-19, maybe.
One thing that's maybe missing here is we don't know when campaigns were. Like,
Okay.
if there might have been a planned campaign that couldn't happen because of the pandemic, maybe that's why it dropped. Like, those would be avenues worth kind of going and digging a little deeper because as a fisher, you can probably go fish that piece of information and add it to give more context to what you see. So sometimes you can find a good source and then you can add on top of it more information to help give a more holistic picture of what you might be seeing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
awesome. So guys, thank you. I'm really cognizant of time because we're well over time. But I really, really want to thank you for that. I am going to finish off with my slides, if I can ever find them. All right, here we go. So we kind of talked about this, right, in little pieces. We realize time is of the essence. Sometimes we don't have all the time in the world, but we got to try do our best in whatever time we have. Um, I wanted to encourage you guys, like I noticed a lot of the links were based off the two portals that we demoed, but it's really important to not narrow your fishing. Don't fish in a pond, fish in the ocean. And the ocean is information. Google is going to be your best friend, right? If you Google some of these things, you probably are going to find a lot more outside of map and outside of Stack Compiler that can actually provide even more stronger evidence than you realize. And I hope that you realize that visuals alone do not cut it. A number alone, it's not enough, right? You sometimes also might want to add more context or find context to help explain what you see. So this was great. This is just an example, but I hope you take away some of these kind of how things work and how sometimes even going and looking for data can take time, and you should really be considering that for your projects as you go along. And something that we didn't talk about, right? But if this is for planning, we didn't have enough time to do this, but it would be really important to make sure we can validate what we see, right? So if we found a trend of Nigeria in map, do we see that same trend in another database? How do we know that's the right up and down that we should see in incidents? How do we know it's right? So we should always be critiquing and questioning ourselves and making that really, really clear where that these are some of the limitations that we find. All right. And I'm just going to end with good fishing doesn't mean just finding evidence and putting it on a presentation. It means trying to understand what you are looking for and what it measures, and then really being careful to explain its usability in helping that decision-making process. All right. So I am going to end there for time reasons, but I will stay on. I just wanted to finish with a couple more of these Slidos. So again, I hope you can bring out your phones because I really want to understand if this exercise has at least helped you to think about the data that you guys might be looking for, especially for your ECR projects, because you are well in now where I think we're expecting ECR concept notes sometime soon. So one of the things that you should really think about, especially when you're developing your concept notes, is how am I going to get the data to do that analysis? So I'm hoping, and I would love to hear from you guys, if this has been helpful. Awesome. And remember, it's okay. If you haven't started thinking about your project, it's totally okay. You've got a whole week, and we're around if you did want to talk to us about some ideas. Your mentors are also around, and I really, really encourage you. Your mentors are absolutely brilliant people. They probably would be really great people to brainstorm with. So it's okay if you haven't started thinking about your project as well. So I only see 2 active participants. We don't have anyone else? Or is internet the problem? All right, yeah, great. So we've got, I'm really glad to see that that for a chunk of you that this like exercise is helping you to think about data for your projects. By the way, just a reminder, so MAP in itself, we have quite a large repository of data. So if you are interested in some data, like please reach out, like talk to Nema, talk to any of us. If it's data that is difficult to find, maybe we can give you some of the data internally. So we process a lot of DHS data. So you might not need to go onto DHS itself to find it. MAP can just give it to you. All right, any others? So this is a pretty low rate of activity when I've got at least 10 people here, and I only have 4 people who have actively on this poll.
Anybody else? All right, for the sake of time, I will move on. But I did want to just see, and maybe this is not going to work. So we're just going to talk. I would love to hear if you wanted to brainstorm a project idea. So again, I know that some of you have already created groups, but maybe you might want to share what you're thinking about. So for those who haven't yet created or thought about a project, maybe they may be interested in joining forces with you. So I'd love to hear if anyone has thought of a project idea, maybe we could talk about it for 5 minutes. So please feel free to unmute yourself and just talk. You don't have to fill in this Slido. You're just welcome to talk. None? Really?
If I may, witness, can I call out on you? Because I know you had reached out about an idea that your team was thinking about and you had some questions. Perhaps would you like to... Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. For our side, we really wish to do maybe a research on relating climate and malaria. But for our side, we are not so much familiarized with malaria data. That's the
All
first
right.
thing. Also, we need a recommendation. You know, we have learned, I don't know, Ministry of Health, I don't know the other map, but we want like which direction can I trust? You know, like if you tell me about weather data, can suggest for you use ERA5 for temperature, don't use it for rainfall and such kind of stuff.
Great question. So I hope you have someone with some malaria background in your team. Like, I think it would be really useful to have someone who at least has some more epi, like they can bring like thinking about public health data. Because I know, Witness, you're more from the climate side. Um, here's one thing I can tell you is I would not recommend using the malaria atlas data to explore the effects of climate. Now, why would I say that? The reason I say that is because the map data that's on our website is a modeled data that already accounts for different environmental covariates, many of which are climatic in nature. So, for example, it's got covariates like rainfall and temperature and vegetation, which are all meant to represent some component of the environment in which transmission is happening. And so you are by nature, because it's modeled on it, going to find a relationship with climate. And so I wouldn't recommend if you are trying to find a relationship using modeled data as the source of information. I would actually recommend using raw data to explore the effects because it hasn't already been accounted for. Yeah. So that's just one piece of advice that I would suggest when you're thinking about the public health data is model data might not be the best for effect, but if you're just trying to do an exploratory, it might help you with some ideas of exploration. I see Bayesian geostatistical modeling of insecticide resistance in Nigeria and its effects on malaria transmission. Whoo, that is a serious project, my friend. So firstly, that could be actually a PhD. Like you could actually spend a PhD doing that topic. I would recommend doing something a little less on the geostatistical modeling front, purely because if you wanted to do a geostatistical model, and I do apologize, but we're not training you on the geostatistical model because you require a lot of high-level statistics to be able to do that well. So geostatistical modeling is typically you require some advanced Bayesian statistics to know how to build it. However,
That being said, you could do some other cool stuff that is geospatial in nature. Like you could look at patterns and you could see if there's certain clusterings around if you take IR mappers data and like if you're noticing that there are clusterings around that information, maybe that's a sign that there's resistance in a certain location more than another location. But you got to take into consideration what the data is and if it's already spatially spread, maybe it's not the smartest, but you could think of other alternatives. I would love to hear like where you would be getting insecticide resistance data. And when we talk about its effects on malaria transmission, maybe you could do something along the lines of thinking about the relationship between resistance and transmission. And you could do something maybe like a regression to be like, can I see an effect? And can I quantify that effect? So you can definitely do exciting things that don't require predictive modeling before you get to predictive modeling, like geostats. But that's a great idea. So definitely encourage it. Any other ideas that you might want to talk about? We can always talk about the data, how you're going to get it.
I'm sorry, can I ask just a question?
Sure.
For example, just in terms of climate, we always prefer 30 years for analysis. What about malaria? Like do we have a specific time span? Like do we have maybe if you're doing research for 10 years or 5 or 1?
It's a really great question. So a lot of public health data doesn't, it's more recent, I would say, than it is long term. And the whole idea of time is dependent on what you're trying to look for. So because malaria, I mean, it only takes like a month for malaria to actually happen, right? It's like mosquito bites you, and then in 2 to 3 weeks, that either builds up parasite load in your body due to different stages, and then you'll show symptoms, and then blah, carry on. So it's a lot shorter in terms of like time scales if you compare it to climate, right? We can see effects in month scales. People estimate outbreaks in week scales because if you're seeing your weekly cases go up, that can be an indication of an outbreak that's happening. So in epidemiology, the frequency is a lot smaller. And then what also is a bit challenging is that when you are looking at, say, for example, surveillance data, most digital surveillance systems only came online from 2015 onwards. So, for example, Tanzania, you will only get data maybe starting from about 2015 that is somewhat reliable. There is older data, but you then want to be considering, since it was not digitized and it wasn't in the same system, can you join them together? Can you get access to that data? It can be a bit challenging. That being said, there can be surveys that go back as far as 2011, but remember, surveys are points in time, so they might not represent everything that's happening in climatology. But I would say like 2015 onwards, you would get somewhat reliable data to be looking at. I hope that helps, Witness.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. To help.
Yeah, but you might like when it comes to climate, I would actually recommend maybe doing what we call weather variability, right? Like it's smaller scaled than climate, which is 30 years minimum.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, thank you. It will help me to broaden my research.
Yeah. Any other kind of curiosities or questions from folks?
Yeah, Ponan, I was thinking about working on something like malaria burden. I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about mortality or incidents, but I think that, for instance, for example, for Mozambique, we have more data, not public one. But I'll for example, on southern Mozambique, the malaria instance is very low.
Mhm.
And we have there's a past many years without implementing like interventions like in north of Mozambique, where the burden is high, malaria prevalence is high. So I was thinking about using, for example, like local malaria data, and maybe I can relate it with climate data, and as well as interventions in southern Mozambique. But I don't have like climate data. So where
Sure.
can I
So
find it? Like open source, where can I find like climate data until the district level, for example?
that's a really great question. Witness, I wonder, since you're our infamous climatologist, if you might know of any public sources
Public sources for meteorological data?
for climate data. Yes.
Yeah, there are open sources. Maybe if you are targeting maybe rainfall with for our side, we always consider data like CHAPS. If we do the correlation, it's correlate well. So we always go with the CHAPS because it's an analysis and it's easy to do it in the running it in maybe Python or wherever you're running it through.
Okay.
For rainfall, for temperature, we prefer ERA 5. That's an open source. So it's a matter of what you want to download with how many years.
Thanks, Witness. So the two surfaces that Witness just described, Jerson, ERA 5 are reanalysis raster data. So basically, they come at 11 by 11 kilometers in resolution, which means that if your district is bigger than 11 kilometers, you can add up a bunch of them cells and it averages up to give you a district level value. Um, CHIRPS is also technically reanalysis data, but it comes from weather station information from a global repository of weather information. And that typically comes at, and Witness, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it comes at daily, weekly, and monthly level. And it's again a raster. So it's an image with cells, and each cell has a value and it's 1 kilometer resolution. So again, you can just add it all up to become a district level estimate. Um, but Jerson, I might also recommend to you, because you have access to your DHIS2 platform, and I think it's part of IMISH now, that they have connected in IMISH, which is by the way, the Mozambique malaria like portal, I would say. It's not DHIS2, but it's like a secondary version. But I think they've connected an IMISH ERA 5 data. So you might actually be able to extract it directly out of DHIS2. And I'd actually recommend talking to James about that because James is connected to that development. But that being said, if you are going to connect incidents, which is what happens in a facility, to climate data, you might also want to think about where people are getting infected. So people are not getting infected in the place they report. They're getting infected in their houses, which means the climate or the weather they experience is where they live, not where they report. And if people are traveling really far away, and this could be happening in places like Cabo Delgado because it's so remote, if people are traveling really long distances, you might want to consider that, because the weather they're experiencing is not what's driving them to the clinic, right? Like if it's raining a lot in the clinic, but it didn't rain a lot where they lived, then the relationship is kind of off when it comes to transmission. So it's worth maybe thinking a little bit about the proposal, like what you are trying to investigate, and if the incidence data is the right one to be giving you that kind of information. Yeah, but otherwise it's a great topic. And actually, I think you would have a really great topic of even thinking about processing the data, and I would highly recommend you speak to Kokoda, by the way, of like how actually, and Harriet, sorry, I apologize, because actually Harriet's the champion for Mozambique. But like when you look at DHIS2 data, you know there can be some noise to it. And I think this is a really good program where you've learned kind of techniques on how to process the data. And that in itself is a really good project of like steps you would take to check and process the data before it becomes a decision useful data set, right? Because sometimes we might be seeing noise where it's not true, or like, you might be seeing really high incidence in Maputo region, and you know that actually that's not where people got their malaria. They may have come from somewhere else, so you might want to process things. So there's a lot you can do in just simple descriptives, and it's worth thinking about. All right, I know I am woefully over time, like crazy amounts over time. Um, but I am more than happy to stay on and continue chatting. But for the rest of you, like, thank you so much for joining data fishing. I hope it was super useful for you. I did have more slides, but I think I really should stop here, because I think overall this might have been useful. I'm going to ask one last question, and that is, how challenging was this exercise? I really genuinely want to understand so we can modify for next season. If the time was off, or like if you found it super easy or really difficult to do this as a group. So you are more than welcome to stay on, and I'm more than happy to continue chatting about projects because I think it's really important. But thank you again for joining Data Fishing. And yes, and please try scan this and like let me know how challenging it was. Okay, great. We're a happy medium. All right. So it was somewhat difficult, I can see. I get it. I think time is the essence. I talk too much. I'll talk less next time, so I give you more time. Maybe an hour. I think we need a whole hour for them. But while people are filling in, does anybody else have any questions about their projects or like projects they were thinking about doing? Oh, and I want to encourage for those of you who are multi-country, like you're from different countries and you're joining together, please don't feel like you have to restrict yourself to a single country. You can do the same exercise in two countries so that you both feel like you've tried it in different settings. So, like, I'll just give an example off the top of my head. The topic that Gerson just described for Mozambique, like the comparison, maybe you want to do it for Mozambique and DRC or Mozambique, Tanzania, Nigeria. Like you can do more than one country for a project. So don't feel shy about that. But you might like maybe keep the method similar so you're applying it to several places. All right, I cannot see everybody, so I have no idea how many people are left. Okay, I see Annabelle, Babalola, Taiwo. Do you have any curiosities or questions?
No, thank you.
All right.
No,
No
thank you.
questions.
It was an excellent session.
Yes. After fighting so much about everybody keeping on time, Nema should berate me about being super overtime. But I guess if there are no more questions, maybe we can close the session.